Happy New Year to Sir Sadiq Khan. Arise, Sadiq Khan, knighted. Has that attracted the typical and expected outpouring of disgust? And what's your view on this, Paul? Do you think, you're a former Labour special advisor, I'm sure you're supportive of all that Khan does, but is he the right person to be on the honours list?
Well, he's one person along lots of people who have had knighthoods and other gongs announced in the New Year's honours, including Conservative mayors. And I think he has the largest mandate of any elected politician in the UK, and he's been re-elected several times. So why not? Why pick on him particularly? I mean, either you agree with an honour system that rewards people for public service, or you don't. But why pick on Sadiq Khan?
Well, living in London, I can name you plenty of reasons why I'd quite like to pick on Sadiq Khan when it comes to the service to the community. And I didn't realise until recently that we pay that extra bit on council tax to go to the mayor and his mayoring around. And I don't know if I'm allowed to unpay that. Can I sort of go on strike from that payment? I don't think I can. Let's talk as well about... before we do that, what about Baroness Nuji now adding a dame to her litany of titles? Is she a deserving recipient? I mean, look, depending on where you are on the side of the political spectrum, you're going to dislike it, But even if it's from your own team, sometimes you can look at things and be like, well, perhaps not, or why particularly them? Wouldn't this person have been better? So if you were sort of in a position where someone sat you down and said, Paul, I want you to come up with 3 Labour Party figures who should get a gong, would Sadiq Khan and Emily Thornberry be on that list?
Well, they are political honours and they are long-standing politicians. And like I say, you either support the system which rewards people from all the political parties or you don't. And personally, I think we need some sort of system of recognising public service. I prefer the honours that go to people that have done fantastic charitable work, for example, or police officers or people who've served the country in various ways. And I think those people, sometimes the unsung heroes, are the far more rewarding or deserving people for these rewards. But it's the system we've got, isn't it? And politicians like to stack up these titles and these gongs, and there we go. I don't think they're any less deserving than anyone else on the list today. I'm rather sad that David Beckham didn't get his knighthood, though. I think that would have been a good one to get, but maybe next year.
Yeah, a couple of people have messaged in about David Beckham getting a knight. I'm just so out of the loop with what David Beckham does, really. I'm not sure. Doesn't he have a farm now? Or so? Everyone's got a farm these days. If you've made some money, if you've made some cash money, you don't just go to a Cotswolds, you get a small holding. That's the way forward, apparently. Let's speak about Tony Blair. Apparently he ignored pleas to delay freedom of movement for EU migrants back in the day. It was David Blunkett, apparently, who whispered in his ear as then, was he Home Secretary? I don't know. But said, look, we need this to build the economy. We're now sort of stuck with the legacy of that, where we have unbridled immigration, so much so that even Sir Keir Starmer turned around and has pointed a finger at the Conservative government saying, look at what you have done and don't make excuses. This was by design. If we turned back the clock and you had Tony Blair's ear, would you be saying to him, would you be giving the same advice as David Blunkett and saying, yes, go ahead and do it? Or would you be more Jack Straw?
I mean, I was a special advisor just after this period that have been revealed in the papers that are out today. And it's an interesting debate that I kind of remember from the time. I remember council leaders coming in to see the politicians I was working with saying, look, we're really worried about school places and transport and all the rest of it. A lot of the people that did come in that period, though, particularly the Polish people, went away again. So it's not like they necessarily settled. And the debate that was raging was, should they be entitled to benefits? And interestingly, Blair was very tough. If you look at the papers, he was saying they should not come here and have easy access to British benefits. They should come here from these accession countries and work. And if you remember, back in the day, they did. They came and mended our boilers and they, did repairs in our houses, and they were pretty helpful members of society while they were here, all those people from Eastern Europe. So it is an interesting historical set of papers that have been revealed, and it just shows, I suppose, that behind the scenes these kind of debates do rage and we never quite see them until 20 years later.
Now let's talk about some of the things that the Labour Party could get up to in 2025, or perhaps what they should get up to in 2025. Going to start on a little story here, which is apparently police have been recording ageist comments as non-crime hate incidents. It seems to me the appetite in the government is to add to the list of potential hate crimes with things such as Islamophobia. Is that the direction of travel, or have we actually reached a point now in society where the Overton window has somewhat shifted and people have said, well, look, this is a nonsense. We need free speech, sticks and stones and all of that, and perhaps we should revisit this legislation, not with a view of expanding it, but potentially scrapping it?
It's a really difficult debate, this, isn't it? Because on the one hand, people say, it's just hurty words and, sticks and stones and all of that. But on the other hand, every violent extremism case we've had starts off as non-violent extremism. If you're talking about things like bullying online, that can drive people into terrible situations, and so it's not just words, it's actually violence online through words, and it can lead to much worse things. So I think there is a role for saying what you can and what you can't say in public. I noticed, by the way, Nigel Farage was threatening to sue Kemi Badenoch the other day for saying something that he didn't like. So it wasn't dirty words in that case. He was going to go to law because she called him a fraud, So words do matter. And I think the evidence is that what starts online as bullying, can lead to real-world consequences.
In the case of Farage and Badenoch, I think he was threatened to sue her over the accusation that his party he was doing something rather than name calling.
Well, wasn't that just her free speech, though? I mean, if you are a free speech advocate, you would say, well, she's free to say that she feels that this was a fraud and he was lying about it.
Making an allegation against someone, accusing them of something, of having done something, is different, I think, from calling someone an unpleasant name. But on that, who decides what is unpleasant, what is harmful, what isn't, what constitutes hate crime? I mean, ageism might now be added to it. But I'll tell you what, Paul, all my life, or my later life as a Brexiteer, I haven't had many kind words said to me from people on your side of the fence. In fact, I would have them labelled as some of the worst. And some of the things they say really are truly horrible, offensive, nasty.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that.
And I want to...
That's not on, is it?
Well, I want to ask you whether or not, when we talk about hurling around words, whether if we're going to be sort of sensitive about this, whether we should be looking at words like gammon, or accusing people of being a Nazi or Nazi scum, or shouting at someone that they're racist, which is a very serious and hurtful allegation. It is besmearing of somebody's reputation. It's besmearing of somebody's character, and a very serious thing, I would say, to call somebody. So if we're going to talk about hate crimes and words that shouldn't be used, should we be thinking of adding those to the list for people who, quite frankly, just have a political viewpoint that's, fairly mainstream?
I think what you're highlighting there, though, is it's a good point, is that somehow our political discussion, our discourse has become totally debased. And I actually blame social media largely for this, because people will say things online and they'll use some of those terms that you've described there, on left and on the right, to say things to people online that they would never in a million years say in public or in a meeting or face-to-face. And it's sort of become now, it's dripping into real life, where people think they can just go up to anyone, say these horrible things. Our members of parliament are subject to this just every single day of the week. And we've become a sort of brittle, fragile kind of society where people run around just calling each other names without any real proper political debate. I mean, what we need in this country is a well-educated, properly informed electorate who can have debates around things like Brexit and immigration and racism without recourse to name-calling. Isn't that not unreasonable?
I totally agree. And interestingly, I don't think I've ever heard Nigel Farage call somebody scum or a fascist or a racist or, any sort of monstrous language like that. I don't think I've ever heard him use such strong accusatory language. And yet most of the cabinet have used exactly that sort of language and exactly that sort of language against the President of America.
Well, as I say, we've seen a debasement of our political discourse to the point where people can do this online as though it doesn't really matter, as though they've got a sort of invisibility cloak just because it's online. And this is why I always advise people never look at the comments, because often it is filled with this kind of hatred and this nasty language. But maybe it's an expression of people's feeling of alienation. They don't want to, they say these things because they don't have ways to say it in a more polite form or structures for that. And that's part of our problem with our politics. I don't want to get too heavy on New Year's Eve, but it's true, isn't it, that, our political system is a bit broken. I think
it is, yeah. I just think, frankly, people call Keir two-tier Keir for a reason, don't they? And there is this growing sense that if you're on the right wing of politics, you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to, any language can be called a hate crime. But the left get away with saying such demonic things about the right. And it gets to the stage, during the riots, this is a genuine thing. During the riots, it's nothing to the Labour Party, but the Socialist Workers' Party, who are a ragtag bunch of ne'er-do-wells, turned up outside places like Reform HQ with their sort of placards shouting things, and were shouting stamp on the necks, nasty scum, Nazi scum off our streets. And I thought, if somebody is so, riled up to be shouting that, and I don't know, something dreadful happened to Richard Tice, what would the repercussions be? Don't we have to be mindful of that language? Because it frightened me, actually, when tensions were running so high. It frightened me. But because I'm a Brexiteer and I'm evil, I'm not allowed to be concerned about my safety. I'm not allowed to be upset or offended by some of the things people might throw in my direction. I think there's a lot of people out there who feel a bit like that. So I do worry about the expansion of the non-crime hate incidents language, because we all know that sort of language will never be covered, that it's a carte blanche, because if it was covered, half the cabinet would be in trouble. Let's talk now about mental health sick days. There's been a surge of those in the public sector. The Labour government have been relatively generous to the public sector so far last year. They've given the carrots. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer is now going to turn around and show them the stick?
Well, the mental health crisis in this country doesn't just affect public service workers, it affects people in the private sector as well, and also kids at school who aren't even in the workforce. And it is a massive crisis. I think it's partly because people are talking about it more than they used to, which is definitely a good thing. People are more articulate now about their own mental health. I think people understand it better, but I think also partly because of the social media I mentioned earlier, post-COVID, because of the pressures of life and other factors, people are suffering from more mental illness, and that's just a fact of life. And we need to have a system in this country that copes with it. And for decades and decades, mental health services have been the poor relation of physical health, and we do need to get to a situation where they're treated equally. And if I was unlucky enough to break a leg or to have a cancer, I would get treated pretty swiftly by the NHS. But mental illness often has to be, you have to wait until it's in its absolute most acutest stage before you even get to see anyone. And if you've got young people suffering from mental health issues, they can't see anyone for years sometimes. So one thing that maybe you'll give credit to the Labour government for doing is putting mental health professionals into schools to help with the young people, putting more mental health staff into the National Health Service to help people.
Do you think they might look into following in Australia's footsteps and cracking down on things like social media access to under 16s?
I think there's a debate to be had. I don't think there's a fully formulated policy on that, but it does have a terrible impact, and because it's new, there's a generation now who've only known this, who are, it's for them it's a fact of life. It's the first generation really that are the test case. So we'll have to see what impact it's had on their socialisation, on the effect on their brains, on their mental health well-being and all the rest of it. But I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media, because we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen, and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger, or, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well, and working, so that the economy as a whole can grow.
Why is it that public sector workers are 3 times more likely to take mental health sick days than those in the private sector? I've got my own theory on this, which is if you're in the private sector and you say, I'm depressed and I don't want to go to work, you might find yourself without a job to go to and stay off work sick from. Whereas in the public sector, I just have a feeling there's a lot more HRing, let's say, in terms of protecting the workforce. And perhaps, given they're sitting at home under their slankets doing their jobs anyway, perhaps we just need to get a bit stricter.
Well, maybe that's the answer, but I suspect what it is particularly people in the health service, just unbelievable amounts of strain over the last few years and through COVID and out the other side. In services that are absolutely stretched to breaking point. And similarly, if you talk to teachers, they will tell you that they are overworked and under stress as well. And I think it's just I think it's more to do with the fact that the public services are so stretched that people working within them are stressed more, and I think that's probably more likely to be the explanation. But it does relate to people in the private sector too, and so today's figures are obviously about the public services, but anyone working in 3 jobs and on a minimum wage and on a call-off contract with 0 hours will tell you that that's pretty stressful as well.
I think a lot of things in life are stressful these days. 2024 is definitely a stressful year. Paul Richards, thank you ever so much, former Labour Special Advisor.